Everyone saw the clip, everyone ran the headline, and almost nobody actually stopped to listen to what Todd Monken said in that room. That's the problem with press conferences in the social media era. Someone pulls 30 seconds out of a 15-minute session, slaps a caption on it, and suddenly that's the story. The interception becomes the whole game, the quarterback becomes the whole problem, and the coach who just watched his team get outclassed somehow becomes the villain, or the savior, depending on which clip you caught first. But here's the thing, if you actually sit down and go through everything Monken said today, word for word from the first question to the last, a completely different picture emerges. Not a comfortable one, not a clean one, but a real one. And that's worth your time, because what's being reported right now and what actually happened in that room are two very different things. So let's slow it down and go through it the right way. The first thing you need to understand about Monken is that he is not a coach who dances around a bad result. He never has been, and today was no different. Right out of the gate, before anyone in that room even had a chance to frame the question in a way that might let him off the hook, he said it himself. They were outclassed, they didn't finish, they didn't perform on either side of the ball. No hedging, no deflection, no, we'll look at the film and get back to you. He walked in, took ownership of the result, and put it directly on the table. That matters more than people realize, because it tells you something about the way he processes a loss. He's not standing up there trying to manage perception. He's not trying to protect anyone's feelings in the moment. When the game was bad, he said the game was bad. That's the baseline. That's where everything else that followed has to be measured against. And once he established that, he moved immediately to what he believed the actual issue was: turnovers. 3 of them. His exact framing was simple. You can't do that 3 times and expect to come out on top. Not, the quarterback made mistakes, not, we had some execution issues at a specific position. Turnovers, plural, as a team. That distinction is going to become very important in a few minutes, so keep it in the back of your mind. Here's where the press conference starts to get interesting, because after Monken owns the loss and names the turnover problem, a reporter asks him about Deshaun Watson. And what comes out of his mouth next is not what you'd expect from a head coach following a game his team just lost. He didn't have to say what he said. Nobody in that room had cornered him. Nobody had put him in a position where he had to defend Watson or pump him up. The question opened a door, and Monken walked straight through it with genuine enthusiasm. He called it awesome. He said it was so cool to watch him play. He talked about Watson having fun out there, about him functioning at a high level, about the credit it deserves given everything Watson has been through to get back on a football field. Now think about that for a second. This is a head coach standing in a podium after a loss in the middle of a quarterback competition that the entire fan base is obsessing over, and he is volunteering positive language about one of the players in the competition without being pushed into it. That is not an accident. Coaches at this level do not just stumble into that kind of language. When Monken says it was fun to watch Watson play, he means it. And the fact that he reached for that as his first positive coming out of a loss tells you where his head is at regarding Watson's progress. But here's what the internet did with that. They took it, clipped it, and ran the headline that Monken had crowned Watson, that Watson had won the first round, that the competition had shifted, and that is where the misread started, because nobody went back and listened to what he said about Shedeur Sanders 30 seconds ago in that same press conference.
Before the Watson praise, before the turnover talk, Monken was asked about Shedeur, and he answered it the same way, with warmth, with specificity, and without any indication that what happened in that game had changed his opinion of his rookie quarterback in a negative direction. He talked about wanting to see how comfortable Shedeur was leading up to the game. He talked about watching him in the huddle, watching how he carried himself through the ups and the downs of a tough day on the field. He acknowledged that there were operational things that could have been better, but then he said something that is easy to gloss over if you're moving fast through the transcript. He said he wanted to see if Shedeur was still enjoying himself, whether this was still fun for him, whether the adversity of a live preseason game was going to shake something loose, or whether the kid was going to hold together. And his answer? In his mind, yes. Shedeur answered those questions positively. That's coming directly from the head coach, not from a fan account, not from an analyst reading the tea leaves, from the man who was standing on the sideline watching every snap. So now you have Monken praising Watson and you have Monken praising Shedeur over the course of the same press conference within minutes of each other. And the story that nobody wants to write is the one where he actually likes both of them, because that story doesn't fit neatly into a winner and loser frame. And that frame is exactly what everyone online was hunting for today. Let's talk about the pick, because that's the moment that broke the internet this week. Shedeur throws it, it gets returned, the crowd reacts, and within minutes, every sports account with a blue checkmark has an opinion about whether the rookie is ready or whether the competition just flipped. Monken was asked about it, and the way he chose to respond is worth breaking down carefully, because there's a layer of meaning in it that goes beyond the surface. He said he'd have to see the film. Standard. But then he added something that wasn't standard at all. He described it as a dagger concept, said the receiver looked open, and suggested that the ball may have sailed on Shedeur. He mentioned a possible push in the face, and then, and this is the key part, he said the same thing about Dylan's interception. Both of them in the right spot. Both reads correct. Both executions imperfect on that particular rep. That is what is known as coach speak. And if you've watched enough of these press conferences, you know exactly what it means and what it doesn't mean. When a coach says the process was right, he is not making excuses for the outcome. He is drawing a specific and deliberate line between a decision and a result. The decision, in his view, was sound. The result was not. And he is making sure that distinction exists publicly because it matters for how his quarterback processes that moment going forward. He didn't have to do that. He could have stood there and said the ball was a bad throw, moved on, and nobody would have pushed back. Instead, he chose to frame it the way a coach frames it when he is protecting a player's confidence without dishonestly papering over what happened. That's a very specific kind of support, and it came without anyone asking him to provide it. Now, here's the moment that got the least attention today and probably deserved the most. At some point during the game, Shedeur Sanders walked up to Todd Monken on the sideline, not the other way around. The rookie went to his head coach in the middle of a game that wasn't going well, and he told him to give him the ball on a short yardage play. His exact words, according to Monken retelling it at the podium, "I'm a powerful dude, man. Just give me the ball. I'll get you in." And Monken's response? "Great, let's roll." They ran the sneak, they got the first down.
Now, think about what that interaction tells you about Shedeur Sanders' headspace after throwing a pick in a preseason game that the entire NFL world is watching. He is not in the locker room replaying the throw. He is not going quiet on the sideline. He is walking up to his coach and telling him to trust him. That is not the body language of a quarterback who has been rattled. That is the body language of someone who believes, regardless of what just happened, that he is still the best option in the building. And Monken, he laughed when he told that story. Not a polite laugh, a real one. You can hear it in his voice at the podium. Coaches do not bring up sideline conversations like that unprompted unless the moment left an actual impression on them. He didn't have to mention it. No reporter asked about it. He brought it up on his own because he wanted to talk about it. That's about as close to public endorsement as a head coach gets without walking up to the microphone and saying your quarterback's name out loud, followed by the words, "He's my guy." It was quiet, it was specific, and it was deliberate. Over the course of that press conference, reporters gave Monken multiple clear opportunities to do something very simple. End it. Name a starter. Tell everyone that the competition has been decided and here's who's taking the first snap in week 1. He didn't do it, not once. The first time, he was asked directly where the competition stands coming out of the game. His answer, pretty even. The second time, he was pressed on whether anyone could still win the job outright after the Bills game. His answer, "I'm not ready to say it yet." The third time, someone pushed again. His answer was a detailed explanation of the evaluation process, meetings, film, practice reps, the Bills game itself, and an explicit statement that he was going to reevaluate after all of that before making any kind of declaration. Pay close attention to the language he used across all three of those responses. Closed, done, decided, set. None of those words appeared, not even close. Every single answer kept the door open, and that is not something a head coach does accidentally when he's managing a room full of reporters. If this competition was genuinely over after one half of preseason football, the simplest thing in the world would have been to say who was starting week 1 and redirect. That's it. Press conference moves on. He didn't do that, which tells you something very direct about where this actually stands. The competition is real, the evaluation is ongoing, and no single game, not even one with an interception that went viral, has closed it. Here's the part that needs to be said clearly, because a lot of people are going to spend the next 24 hours operating on bad information. The narrative that took off today was simple. Shedeur threw a pick, Monken praised Watson, competition flipped, rookie in trouble. That is the version of events that fits into a clean headline. It moves fast, it gets clicks, and it is not what happened in that room. What Monken actually did was the opposite of bury his rookie quarterback. He praised Shedeur's composure, he defended the read on the interception, he contextualized the execution issue as something that also happened to Dylan on a different play. He pointed out the bigger problem, the one he returned to repeatedly, was the offense as a whole never finding its rhythm. 1st and 25 situations, no sustained drives, a defense that was wearing down from being on the field too long because the offense couldn't stack plays together. That is a team problem, not a quarterback problem, and Monken made that framing choice deliberately before anyone had a chance to push him toward it, because that is how he actually sees what happened in that game. He also made a point that often gets lost in the coverage of preseason games. Starters aren't playing full snap counts. The rhythm that an offense needs to build over the course of a game simply doesn't develop the same way in August, and attributing a loss of that size to one throw by one player ignores 11 other guys who are also struggling to find their footing against a defense that was dialed in from the start.
None of that made the clips that are currently circulating. None of it made the headlines, because it doesn't fit. So let's bring this back to ground and talk about what is actually true coming out of today. Shedeur Sanders will still start against the Bills. That was the plan before the preseason game. It is still the plan after it. The interception did not change that. Monken confirmed it directly and without any visible hesitation when it came up. The depth chart, contrary to what the discourse around the pick would have you believe by now, has not flipped. Watson played well in his opportunities, and Monken made sure everyone in that room knew it. That is also true. And both of those things can be true at the same time without one canceling out the other, even though the internet would very much prefer that they couldn't. What the Bills game will actually determine is still unclear because Monken has been careful, almost surgical, about not committing to a timeline for a final decision. What we know is that after that game, the evaluation process enters a different phase. The reps will have been logged, the film will exist, the coaches will have watched both quarterbacks under competitive pressure, and they'll make the call from there. But here's what the sneak story, the press conference framing, and the careful language all point toward when you put them together. This is a head coach who went into today wanting his rookie quarterback to succeed. And even after a game that included a turnover that set the internet on fire, he came out of it still talking about Shedeur Sanders with the tone of a coach who sees something in the player that he believes in. That's not a guarantee of anything. Football doesn't work that way. But it is a very different thing than a coach who is quietly building a case to move on. And right now, those two things are being confused for each other at a pretty remarkable rate. Here's the thought worth sitting with as the week plays out. Everything that happened today, the game, the picks, the press conference, the clips, the headlines, is preseason noise. Real evaluation noise, yes, but noise in the sense that none of it is the moment. The moment comes after Buffalo. That's when the conversations get serious. That's when the coaches walk into the building on a Monday morning with all the reps logged, all the film watched, and a decision that actually carries weight waiting to be made. And the thing is, Monken has set this up so that whatever happens after that game, he hasn't backed himself into a corner. He hasn't crowned anyone. He hasn't buried anyone. He's kept the door open with just enough specificity about the process that whoever comes out of Buffalo with the stronger case has a legitimate shot at the job. What happened today was a head coach managing a very complicated situation with a steadiness that didn't get nearly enough credit because the clip of the interception was louder. But if you listen to the whole thing, every question, every answer, every carefully chosen word, what you heard was a coach who hasn't given up on his rookie, who respects what his veteran is doing to come back, and who is not going to let a single preseason result make a decision that the next 3 weeks of evaluation should be making. That's the actual story. It's less dramatic than the headlines, but it's the one that's actually going to matter when the season starts.